What do you think of when I say the word evidence? Courtrooms and testimonies? Labs and scientific results? Well, your answer shows what you think is credible when it comes to evidence. And what you think is credible can be different from what someone else thinks. When we're making persuasive claims, we need evidence to back up our ideas. We want to tap into the hearts and minds of our readers to make them act. So we're going to get old school. We're going to use the basic principles of persuasion as defined by Aristotle, and we're going to make appeals to our audience's sense of credibility, logic, and emotion. So first, with credibility appeals, you want to ask yourself, what is your reputation with this audience? How much do they know about you and your background? For example, if you're writing your boss to ask for some extra time off and you've never missed a day, you're going to have a much easier task. But if you're always late, you might want to think about a different strategy because of your reputation with that person. You also want to ask yourself, how much does your audience know about this topic? In other words, how much background information do I need to provide? We know that when we don't provide enough background information for our audience to understand our argument, they feel alienated and they tune us out. But the opposite can also be true. If your audience is an expert in this topic and you give them lots of unnecessary background information, they're going to also tune you out and be less likely to be persuaded. You want to think about what kind of credentials you can showcase to show your connection and expertise with the topic. For example, when we started this course together, I told you about my education, qualifications, and why I care so much about communication, hopefully to persuade you to get this far in the series and listen to what I have to say. We also want to think about speaking the language of our audience by using the jargon that they would use. For example, if you're working with a group of engineers and you're an engineer, you can use a lot of technical language and jargon to show them that you understand where they're coming from. But the opposite can also be true. If you get too technical with an audience that doesn't understand that jargon, they're going to tune you out. Next, we want to think about making logical appeals. This is where we're thinking about what makes sense to my audience. What kind of logic are they going to find persuasive? Now, usually when we think about logical appeals, we just think about data, statistics, numbers, facts. Those are great, but that's not all of the logical appeals that are available to us in our tool belt. We can also use metaphors and comparative examples to appeal to our audience's sense of logic. For example, if you're writing a proposal asking your bosses to change a process, you could show them what your competitors are doing in that space. They're going to not want to miss out. And you could also include a metaphor, like we're behind the tide on this trend, to really double down on those logical appeals. Next, we want to think about appealing to our audience's sense of emotion. What do you want to make them feel with this message? We can use vivid language, visual images, and even stories. So we know from research that stories can be up to 22 times more persuasive than facts alone. For example, in one research study, participants were asked to donate to Save the Children, which is an international organization fighting child poverty. In one condition, the participants were just given facts and figures about childhood poverty. In the second condition, the participants were told a story about a child that was experiencing poverty. Guess which group donated more? The ones that heard the story. So, in summary, we want to use lots of different types of evidence that's interesting and persuasive to our audience. We want to build credibility. We want to tap into our readers' sense of logic and make them feel something with emotion. We want to put all of these together and move our audience to